Hello out there. This is Dexter B. Jenkins, and welcome to Let's Talk Real Estate. This is the show where we get together once a month. Oh, good Lord, new lips, y'all. Get together once a month to talk about how to use real estate as a wealth creation tool. We are at the studio of New England Christian Television Network. They graciously host us every month under the leadership of Ministers Eddie Jules. So we thank God for him and thank the network for allowing us to be able to use this room for free. And so that is a major blessing. Now, as you guys know, we usually have some of the best and brightest in our area come and talk to us about, how do we use real estate as a wealth creation tool, because that's what this is all about, showing you exactly how to do that, as well as really raise your overall level of financial literacy. So tonight is no exception. We have one of the brightest attorneys in our area. Her name is Krista L. Emerson. And so I'm gonna let Krista introduce herself. But just so you guys know, Krista and I go back some time. She was actually very gracious enough. I mean, we hadn't done our first deal at all. Remember us being in Woburn, and we met at that restaurant, and she said, hey, I was just really thinking about doing some of these things. And Krista was gracious enough to give me some of her time. And then she also helped us close our first two real estate transactions. And if you ever talk to anyone who's ever been represented by her, they always say she's a bulldog for her clients. we were doing a meetup in New Bedford, and we were talking about different referrals of different attorneys. And I said, and I mentioned your name and a couple other names, and a couple people in the audience had been used. I think the Sousas, Al Sousa, I think they got, and they were like, Krista, she's a bulldog for her clients. I said, well, that's what you want, people who are going to fight for you, when you're out there doing things that you don't know how to do, and so on and so forth. So without further ado, you guys give a round of applause for Krista L. Emerson. Thank you for coming through. Thank you for coming. She lives on the other side of Boston and has two sons, so she is graciously giving us her time, and so we don't take this for granted. So introduce yourself to the people, name and all that.
Sure. So as Dexter said, I'm Krista Emerson. I'm a real estate attorney. I've been in practice since 2010. Been really heavily involved in the investor side of things since 2015, 2016. I would tell you that a good portion of my practice at Landmark Title is investor-based. It's probably 90 to 95% of our business is investors with creative finance deals and wholesaling assignments, fix and flips, buy and holds, all the stuff that investors do. I don't just do regular closings. We also do landlord-tenant work. I do a lot of evictions for my clients that buy their multifamilies with the problem tenants. I myself have invested. I can give you a little quick story about my first experience as a flipper. I did everything I tell my clients not to do because I don't take my own advice. Notwithstanding, I still did really well. I bought a house at foreclosure in Dracut, which is right down the road from me. I lucked out because it said it was occupied, and I sent a letter to the woman, asked her what it was going to cost to move her out, and she called me and said, I've been out for months. You don't have to pay me a dime. By the way, the back door's open if you want to go in and look, because I see the deed still in my name. I said, that's fantastic. Knew exactly how much work needed to be done, not a whole lot.
Right.
Put the property under contract. We closed December 29th of 2019. My contractor got all the permits together, was supposed to start March 12th of 2020.
And we know what happened in March of 2020.
Yeah, so
Life changed drastically for all of us.
4-week delay with that.
Right.
And then I ended up firing the contractor partway through because he was terrible. Didn't finish the job, had somebody else come in, had to deal with all that. Took much longer than it should have. And then, of course, in Murphy's Law turn of events, my buyer, we were supposed to originally close on December 30th. They didn't close on December 30th. And they were going to close on January 12th. She went to close on January 12th. She wired her money to the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
So she sent $140,000 to the wrong company. and they can't take the money back because she told them where to send it. So that delayed even longer. We didn't get on record until February 9th of 2021.
So you're talking about almost a year between
Over a
when you
year.
bought it, when you bought it and closed on it, yeah.
So luckily, the market had improved during that time.
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
However, I probably left about 40 grand on the table. If I had put it on the market and canned them in December, probably would have been able to make 40 grand more if I had gone with another buyer. So I know exactly what it's like to flip a house, and I know that I really should listen to my own advice because I can give it, but apparently I can't follow it.
Isn't that life?
It really is.
It's easy to give advice as opposed to taking your own time.
Absolutely. And I've wholesaled kind of by accident. I've told some people this story. I went to go look at a property that a friend of mine had put as an off-market listing, and she said, my seller doesn't want to market it. You know, one side is livable, but it needs some work. The other side, her brother was living in it, passed away. It's in horrible condition. So I go and look at the property. Her side is, needs to be updated. Not anything bad. You could still rent it, no problem. The other side had no plumbing, had no electricity, had no heat, had no gas, and the ceiling was on the ground. I don't know what the brother was doing there. He never let her over. So she had given us a price, and I said, I don't know if you're going to get that, but let me ask around.
Right.
So I contacted a gentleman that I know who has his own construction company, does his own development. He's a realtor himself. He's flipped a bunch of properties. He's a landlord. And he said, I'll give her $9 grand over asking for it. I looked at him and said, seriously? He goes, yeah, and I'm going to give you $5 grand for getting me the property.
Right.
I said, I didn't put it in a contract. And he's like, well, put it on the HUD as an assignment fee or wholesale fee because you found me the property. Right. So kind of did that by accident. It was a nice little $5 grand surprise.
Yeah.
I'm looking for another flip, but we were talking about I need something perfect for me. Right. I don't want to do
we're heading in that direction. Talk about what we've done, and so you know, and so our audience know, we've had people from Western Mass, so we had oh my God, her name escapes me right now. The Coffee Realtor talked to us about what's going on Western Mass. We've had people in Boston, so we haven't had anybody north of the city. So you know, so talk to us about what you're seeing on the north side of Boston. Meaning, you know, we're always looking at, you know, where are the next areas to invest. So talk to us about north of the city of Boston and maybe even to New Hampshire. I don't know if you go that far a little bit.
Yeah, New Hampshire's tough.
Okay.
I would probably tell everybody to kind of shy away from New Hampshire because the taxes in New Hampshire are crazy.
Okay.
One place that we're seeing that is going crazy on the North Shore is Lynn. It used to be one of those places where nobody wanted to live, nobody wanted to visit, and housing values are crazy.
Okay.
I live in Lowell. Our housing values are nuts in most of the areas. They have leveled out a little bit. Okay. Mainly because of the interest rates. So things have leveled out a little bit. Properties are still going for over asking, but you're not seeing $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, $100,000 over asking. Because the buying power just isn't there for people with the increased interest rates. So it's definitely starting to level off for the retail buyers. On the investor side, I'm still seeing people put rock star deals under contract. It really is just a matter of who you talk to and who can work the deal. Right. I've seen some really, really good deals go under recently with some phenomenal wholesale fees. Right. So,
now we're going to talk about what wholesale is in a second, but go ahead.
Yeah. So they're still making money. It's more about the people and how they find the deals and how they approach the sellers. Right. We are seeing a lot more of creative financing, where sellers are financing their own deals for the buyers. Okay. We have a couple clients that are doing that a ton now. Right. The sellers have their homes paid off, and instead of just selling it and taking the tax hit, they're loaning the money to the buyer.
They're becoming the bank, basically.
Right. Yeah. And the buyer is coming in and saying, all right, we'll pay you 5% interest on this $300,000 loan. Right. And it's cheaper than them going to any bank for conventional or commercial. Right. And it's definitely cheaper than hard money. So there's lots of different creative strategies that I'm seeing people use now, and that is probably one of the more common ones that we're seeing in this market.
Really? Yeah. So far you said Lynn. Where else would you invest, or were you seeing your people invest on North of the city?
Lawrence.
Okay.
Lawrence is a big one, which again is kind of surprising because it has that little bit of a stigma for not being a great place. But there's tons of multis. I have a client who picked up 2 rooming houses. He's got 110 rooms between the 2 of them now, and that's been incredible.
Phenomenal. Exactly.
What we're seeing a lot of now, specifically on the North Shore because I'm up there, is in like the Haverhill, Lawrence area. A lot of investors, because there's such a need for it, are opening up sober homes and multifamily homes. They're using them as sober living and getting licensed to run them as a sober living facility. So that's kind of been the big hot spot up in that area. I have one guy that bought, I think, 3 houses and is opening up 3 different sober homes. So that's another thing that's been kind of a big push for people because there's a huge need for it.
Exactly.
So, and again, it's really just identifying what everybody needs. You know, and in some communities that's what's needed, and in other communities it's buying a house for $500,000, putting $300,000 into it, and selling it for 1.5.
Exactly.
So it's really just knowing the market. Those are probably 2 of the hottest spots up on the North Shore right now.
So far, you guys listening, right? So now, what our class talks about all the time is there's a formula that I have our people use. I said that you have to find deals, you have to fund them, and you have to monetize them.
Yes.
You know, so there has to be an exit strategy. So many different ways. So you've talked about some of the ways that we'll get to wholesale in a second, but then you're talking about the funding them. You know, so the creative ways kind of thing. One of the biggest things that most new investors and just investors in general always talk about, how am I going to pay for the deal? You know, and I think that stops a lot of people from taking action. And so I think the more strategy that people can open their minds up to, you know, it will allow them to, you know, to get involved in deals. And then you're like the 3rd person I've talked to that has talked about sober houses, and all of them have been, to your point, Haverhill, Lawrence, those type of areas, and you know the amount of money that people are making, which is good because what you can do is, there's a saying that you can do well as you're doing good.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
So I think that is something that if people can think outside of the box somewhat and be able to, because the key to those is make sure they run well.
Absolutely.
Because if they're not run well, it's HE double hockey sticks on wheels.
And there's lots of people that run them for the money and not because they want to help people.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
That's an unfortunate part, but there is a huge need for it. So that is definitely one of the hot button things. With respect to funding deals, that is where most people get stuck. Because most people don't have any money to get started. And one thing I always tell people when they're getting started in investing is, get a partner if you have to. Never be afraid to bring somebody else in with you. As you know, if somebody you know and trust, if it's somebody that comes referred to you, if somebody has the capital and you're willing to run the project, joint venture with them. There is no reason to not split the profits. I always tell people when we're looking at deals, when I have clients say, oh, well, you know, I'm only going to make, you know, $20,000 in this deal. I don't know if I should do it. And I said, well, 20,000 is always is always more than 0. You can make 20,000 for the same amount of work, or you can make 0 just walking away. It's up to you. I don't write the checks out of your checkbook. I don't run your bank account, but you know, for me, if I can make 20 grand doing what I'm doing versus 0 because I don't want to take just 20, I'm going to take the 20 every day.
Every 20,000 helps.
Absolutely. I've had people make $2,000 on a deal and been thrilled because the learning that they got on it is, the learning experience is more valuable than anything that they could have made monetarily.
And that's what you have to understand. It's the education more so the money. Now obviously you have to get the money, because if you don't have enough money, you won't stay in the business long term. But it's the education. I mean, we're not by any stretch of the imagination the most experienced, but we've left the port. And every project has taught us something, and so.
Yes, they do.
Each project teaches you something, and so you never have arrived in this business. But I believe the more education and the more deals you do, the more confident you become. And really, that's what this is all about. If I could transfer anything to the people that we deal with, is to give them confidence. And so part of what you said is, which I thought was great, is partnerships with someone who has maybe more experience than you can help you do that. Now, talk about what are some things that people should do to partner well? Because I've heard of bad partnerships. Talk about some good partnerships.
You definitely, if you're looking at somebody who has experience, you want to know exactly what their experience is. I've seen people who have flipped 10 properties and have never made any money. You know, they've bought 10 properties, tried to flip them, and they made, you know, $5,000 total. That's not somebody you want to partner with. You want to talk to them and say, you know, tell me about your deal. Tell me about, you know, show me your settlement statement. If they're going to be your partner, they should be open to giving you that information anyway. You know, what was your budget? Ask them the right questions about that. There's nothing worse than getting into a bad partnership, especially when money is involved.
It's a marriage.
It is.
Really is. It's a marriage.
It really is. My recommendation would be find somebody you know that you've met or that you've encountered who has done deals and can show you what they've done, and just approach them and say, listen, I'm learning. I'm looking for somebody to help me along the way.
Right.
I can find the deals. I'm having trouble with the funding. You know, I don't really have the money to put down, but I'm willing to manage the whole project and learn from you. And yeah, you might have to give them 60% of the profits. But what you learn and what you take out of it is going to give you money to roll into the next deal.
Correct.
And to be able to get to do this on your own.
Right.
I highly, highly, highly recommend doing written agreements to outline everybody's duties.
Oh, stop right there. What did she say, y'all? No. Back no. I'm quote her correctly. Highly. Now this is attorney talking to you, right? This is an attorney. This is attorney Emerson talking to you. She said she highly recommends you do what? Say that one more time.
Put everything in a written agreement.
Oh God.
Everybody's duties and obligations.
There you go. Duties and what? Obligations. Y'all see that on TV? Duties and what? Obligations. All right, keep going.
There's nothing worse than getting into a partnership and doing just a very informal handshake agreement, and then one person says, well, did you call the contractor for the siding? No, you were supposed to do that. No, you were going to do that. Well, we talked about it. Well, it should be in an agreement. Everybody's duties should be outlined. What everybody is contributing should be outlined. What everybody receives in profits should be outlined. Money makes people crazy. You know, it turns people into completely different individuals when money is involved. So if you have everything specifically defined at the outset, there's not going to be any question about what anybody is doing or what everybody is earning.
Right.
But I would definitely do that. I would do a JV or create an LLC and an operating agreement that outlines everybody's duties. I would not, joint venture, sorry. I would not ever recommend just a casual, let's do this together
handshake,
deal.
Yeah.
No, that's
pinky swear.
a recipe for disaster.
Yeah,
Even if you write it on a paper towel, I don't
Something.
care as long
It's
as there's
legal,
something
yeah.
in writing.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, it's definitely easy to find people who are willing to help. I know several people kind of up my way in more central Mass that take on quote unquote students, and they don't charge them necessarily, but they will take a portion of the fee that you earn when the deal is done. So you're getting the mentorship and you're learning, you're giving up a little bit of your profit, but that education is invaluable.
Invaluable. You know, because that is once you know what to do, now you can go out on your own or help other people, you know.
And don't be surprised when crazy things happen in real estate deals. Everybody always says to me, oh, you're a real estate attorney, it must be so boring. Nothing about what I do is boring. I could write a book. We've had some really nutty things happen. So in saying that, expect the unexpected.
Right, true.
Always expect the unexpected. Because I had a professor in law school who used to say to my class, the truth is stranger than fiction. You cannot make this stuff up.
Right.
So the things that actually happen in the real world, it's never going to be like what you see on TV.
No.
Okay? If you go onto a property that has a septic and a giant patch of the grass is green and they look at it, they know the septic doesn't work. They're not going to be surprised when they have to put a $40,000 septic in.
Yeah.
They saw it, they know it doesn't work, it's all for TV.
Yeah. That's so true.
Just but
it's always the issue, and then it goes to commercial.
Yes.
And then it comes back. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to watch Flipping Vegas just for fun, and everything being, oh, geez, this now.
Uh-huh. He was a whiner.
Yeah, he really was.
He's a whiner.
But, you know, you will encounter things like that. I had a client who bought a property, and he was like, yeah, I guess I kind of missed the crack in the foundation. I was like, can it be repaired? He goes, it can be repaired, but It's money I wasn't planning on spending. So, that's where the mentor also comes in as well.
Right.
Because there are going to be things that you completely miss.
Right.
The first time I went to look at a property to try and wholesale, it was a 3-family in East Boston. I was like, this is great. This is a fantastic deal. I had like 6 people interested in it. I didn't get to close it because we found out they were building the MBTA exhaust plant right behind it. So what would have been a $700,000 condo was now like $500,000.
Yeah.
So we backed out of that one. But one of the questions that somebody asked me when I presented the deal to them was, so how many windows are there? And I was like, I don't know. It's 3-family. It's 3 floor. I don't know, like 6 per floor? Or 12.
Right.
Windows are not cheap. Like $300 per
easily,
window.
Yeah, easily. 200 to 300 a window.
Yeah.
It's
12
what we
windows
pay.
times 3 is 36
$3,600,
times 300 is
3,600.
not
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
money to miss.
Yeah.
Just a lot of the stuff that people will
Right.
look at and be like, oh, that's not a big deal. Water damage.
Yeah.
It's not always just painting over it. Sometimes you have to replace the drywall.
No.
Sometimes you have to
You gotta
replace
fix
the
it, yeah.
insulation. Sometimes the wood's rotted.
Right.
Having somebody who's been there and done that and knows what to look for, you have to have somebody who
Yeah.
knows it. And you have to have somebody who knows the construction costs too,
Right.
because they're constantly changing. And depending on where you are, they can be completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, Western
Yeah.
Mass is going to be much different than Metro
Boston.
Boston.
Yeah.
And North Shore is going to be vastly different than Worcester and Fitchburg.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's the fascinating thing. If you get, even from certain areas, you get bids from certain contractors. You can get a low end,
Yep.
this, high end, that. You're like, it's the same job.
Right.
You know, but what I always say is people are willing to work for different prices.
Absolutely.
And so some
They sure
guy,
are.
some guys may be willing to
Yep.
work for, 200 a window. One guy said, I won't do it for but 350.
Yep.
And so part of your due diligence as a flipper or even as a retail person is to talk to 2 or 3 individuals
Yes.
because you just never know who's going to give you the best deal. And sometimes the cheapest is not always the best.
Exactly.
Matter of fact, I would say most often.
Right.
When matter of fact, if a bid is too low, I'm like, okay, what's up with this? Because
There's a
this
reason
is
for it.
this is way too low.
It's usually the bait and switch. They give you the estimate and then like, actually it's going to be double.
Yeah, exactly.
And they end up being more expensive than the person that they
Exactly. Yeah.
were outbidding
Right.
and beat out. And I would also say vet your contractors, look them up,
Oof.
because some of these contractors are really terrible. And sometimes it happens between jobs. I mean, I had a client who had this guy come in and save the day when his flip was going horribly wrong. And the guy came in, he finished the project, he finished it ahead of time, from what his schedule was. Obviously, they were off schedule because of the prior contractor. He finished ahead of schedule. He did a great job. They got the house sold. Everything was great. They hired him for a second job,
It was horrible.
and he wouldn't respond to calls. He wouldn't show up. He was like, oh, yeah, I got to change this. It's $10,000 more. And he was like, for what? He's like, yeah, it's just $10,000 more. So it got to the point where, I ended up having to step in with this client, and we had a meeting with the contractor, and I said, well, you're fired. And he's like, you brought your attorney here to fire me? I said, well, you weren't hearing my client when he said that
Right.
you were not doing what needed to be done. I said, so I am here to hand you your termination letter and tell you that you're fired. And they were not happy about that, but they didn't do the job. And
Yeah.
he was raving about them.
Right.
After he saved them in his Revere project. He was like, they're phenomenal. I can't wait to work with them again.
Right.
And then he had them over a project, I think it was Everett, and they were horrible.
Right.
And then I said, what else do you know about them? And he's like, I'm not really sure. And I Googled them, like, I have pretty bad reviews. I think your Revere property was kind of the anomaly and not
Right,
the
the
norm.
outlier, yeah.
And you really have to look at the reviews too, because some people get really upset over silly things.
So
in reviews.
So since we're
vet your
there,
contractors.
tell us what we can do legally to look up to look up a contractor, because there's some websites and things you can go to.
Yeah, so you can obviously Google. You can do like the Better Business Bureau and look them up on the Better Business Bureau. That's not always a great avenue for people. I prefer everybody using personal references and people that they've worked with.
Exactly.
You can check court records to see if they've ever been sued. not always easy when you don't have access to the system, but if somebody says to me, hey, I'm going to hire ABC Contracting out of Attleboro, can you check them out for me? I totally made that name up. That's not a real place. Not a real company. I can look it up and see if they've ever been sued and what they've been sued for. If they're sued because they didn't finish the job or because they walked off with money, I'm going to be like, hey, you don't want to deal with these people. You know, could it be that it was a one-time thing? Maybe, but do you want you to be the second time potentially? No. That's definitely the best way. I think personal referrals are always the best.
Correct.
Somebody that's established and has done good work for other people before is always the best route to go.
Yeah. All right, so far, any questions in the audience thus far? Or was Krista just that mesmerized you guys don't know what to ask?
I have a question.
Sure.
You said Lowell and Lynn are like, you said crazy. Is that you just talk about the prices that things are going for? Or is there like volume transactions going on that?
Oh, sorry. So you want to know if it's the volume of the transactions or the prices in like the Lowell Lawrence area?
What's making Lowell?
What's making it?
Yeah.
It's a lot of the prices being driven up. There is still a lot of investor activity going on in those places for multis. I think there's a lot of landlords kind of trying to get out of the landlording game.
Right.
So there's a lot of multis coming on, but the prices are pretty nuts. There's a four family around the corner from where I live that was purchased for I think $450 like 4 years ago, and it was on the market for $900. So
That's appreciation.
a big jump.
Yeah.
And I don't live in the super wealthy area
Okay.
of Lowell. I
Right.
live in a nice neighborhood, but I don't live in the wealthiest neighborhood in Lowell, as
Right.
I like to call it.
Right.
So it's really just the prices are crazy, like they are everywhere else. But people, like I said, people are still finding deals.
Right.
It's a lot of just digging for them.
Right.
You know, nothing on market. People aren't finding anything really on market. You never really find anything on market for flipping or
Right.
real deals.
Right.
It's all going to be off-market stuff.
Can you talk about off-market stuff?
Mhm.
How do you find like off-market stuff?
Yep.
Where should you look for off-market stuff?
There's a ton of ways to find off-market. One of the easiest things to do, and I did this when I first started getting into investing and working with one of the women who actually got me involved in this, I would drive around and I would drive around with my kids and my son would be like, Mom, that house looks gross. You should write that down and
Yeah.
you should follow it. You should follow
Yeah.
that, you know, through the registry and find out who
Track it
owns that
down.
house.
Yeah.
That's the easiest way to do it. Just in your travels, if you can drop a pin in your location, drop the address, go onto the registry or go onto the tax assessors database, make sure it's the right house, find out who owns it, send a letter to them. Call them if you can skip trace them. Skip tracing is basically just finding their phone numbers and calling them. A lot of people go for probates, people who have passed away. You can get that information in the court records. Not the easiest to find. People will sell you lists.
Right.
It's probably just as easy for you to dig yourself. I do have a guy that I worked with who used to go through the obituaries.
Mm-hmm.
little
Matter of fact, I took a class this summer where a guy was teaching us how to go through
Yeah,
obituaries.
it's a little morbid, but he had actually had his eye on this house, and he knew this person was the owner, and he had no other way of knowing who he was related to. He's like, oh, I just found his daughter, you know, Kimberly Johnson.
Right.
And he just said, oh, you know, I see that you got a house and it's going to go into probate. You interested in selling? Sure, we're just going to get rid of it.
Yeah.
One of you know Renee, right? Renee
Tepper.
Pepper.
Yeah.
She actually had a really interesting way of finding off markets. She talked to her mail carrier because the mail carriers know where all the vacant houses are. And they'll know when the mail piles up. So she said, I'll give you $1,000 if you tell me
Right.
all the vacant houses, which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just driving through unfamiliar neighborhoods and you find a cluster of them. I've driven through my neighborhood and driven down some of the side streets that I never went down before, and I was like, oh, there's like 3 houses down
Yeah.
here that I need to hit.
Yeah.
You can do certain programs that you pay for a lot of the
Yeah,
time
exactly.
and get, you know, absentee owners, deceased owners, people who have code violations. One of the lesser known ways is if you go to like a city hall meeting certain times, this is going to sound crazy, they will talk about the houses that are in such severe code violation that they're talking about bringing suit against them from the city. I don't usually go to city hall meetings, but a couple of years ago, we had a whole fiasco with the high school
Right.
in Lowell. So I went to the city hall meeting. In the beginning of the city hall meeting, they were talking about all of these properties that had code violations they were going to bring to court to enforce them criminally. Those are perfect to target.
Right.
If you can spend a couple hours and sit at the city hall meeting, you know, and get that information,
Or hire somebody
for
who
it.
can do that.
right.
Yeah.
It's a lot of digging. A lot of the clients that I work with on a regular basis who are doing high volume do pay a lot for marketing, and do use a lot of different systems to kind of target stuff.
Right.
But when you're starting out, just drive around.
Yeah.
Drive around, make note of the addresses, send letters, make phone calls. I personally am not comfortable with cold calling. I would make somebody else do it. I can talk all day long, but if you get me on the phone and I am not familiar with you or I don't know exactly what you're going to say to me,
You're going to freeze up?
I'm going to stutter and sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. But the biggest part of this is if you do call somebody is you have to come off as confident like you've been doing this forever.
True.
They can tell when you don't have the confidence in what you're asking. And just say basically, hey, you know, I drove past your house. I just wondered if you would be interested in selling. You know, I'm an investor in the area, and I'm constantly looking for properties. If you're not interested, and you know somebody who might be, you know, here's my information.
Right.
Word of mouth is huge. And I'll
Huge.
tell you, when you're working with people, sometimes they're not going to sell you their house, but you might be able to come up with a different solution for them that doesn't involve them selling their property. I mean, we've had people come to some of our clients and say, I want to sell my house. And they realize that their house is not worth anywhere near what they can offer for it.
Right.
And they said, well, you know, we can always send you to a short sale negotiator because your house is underwater.
True.
It doesn't happen as much now, but it's starting to a little bit because people have over-leveraged themselves.
Right.
And you may not make any money off that, but I always say, you know, you don't know who that person knows or who is in their social circle.
Right.
So they may be having a conversation with, you know, Maria from work, and Maria's like, oh, you know, I just inherited my grandmother's house. It needs so much work. I don't even know what to do with it. We don't want
Right.
to clean it out. And that person that you referred to the short sale negotiator might say, hey,
Right.
I just talked to Cindy. She couldn't buy my house, but you know what? This is what she does. You should give her a call.
Right.
You never know who knows people. I always tell everybody that my very first case when I went into private practice, I did a lot of disability law in the beginning because that's what I was really familiar with, and real estate was kind of like a small piece of my business. My very first client in private practice, I got 9 cases off of hers.
Yeah.
That's
That's how it
insane.
goes,
And because I didn't know who she knew.
Right.
And she just kept saying, you know, she did a great job for me. She really helped me. She referred me to her sister, who referred me to this person and this person and this person, this person, this person. And I said, how did you find me? And they said, oh, Maggie. I said, she's still getting me
Still
clients,
getting you
huh?
referrals, yeah. Yeah, still getting you
So
clients.
everybody's circle is much larger than you know.
Right.
So that's a great way to do it. Talk about what you do.
Right.
Don't be afraid to tell people that this is what you're trying to do.
Right.
It's all about getting your name out there. I am not a proponent of sticking signs on telephone poles.
Right.
I think they're kind of a waste. I'm also not crazy about mailers, like when you send out the postcards. They usually, sometimes they're okay. It depends on who does them. Sometimes they're really just not effective.
Right.
I don't know very many people that have a ton of success from mailers. It's more person-to-person interaction, a handwritten letter.
Right.
If you're going to send letters, I highly recommend handwriting
Handwriting
them.
them. Yeah.
Even if you do, this is what I did for a while. I took a Sharpie and wrote my letter and just left out a spot for an address and made copies of it and would
Right.
keep my Sharpie in the car with an envelope and stamps, and I would write down the address and I would put that letter in there and I'd drop it right in the mailbox.
Right.
So it was handwritten,
Right.
but the address was the only thing that was written in on that
Got it.
copy.
Got it.
There's so many ways to do it.
Yeah, but I think the key thing is you said the word intention.
Yes.
And if you have the intention that this is what I'm going to do, you will find that you will be pulled into conversations and situations. I think a lot of times we don't decide this is what we're going to do.
Right.
And I can even go back to when we first started, when I said, this is what we're going to do. And the next thing you know, you see all type of things. If
Yeah.
you know anything about psychologists talk about something called the reticular activating system.
Yep.
Which is simply, when you say something is important to you, you'll see all type of things
Yes.
that will bring you to where you want to go. So it's almost like when you bought a car, and you're like, oh, this is the greatest car, and then you drive by, there go my car, there go my car, there go my car. Well, the cars were there all the time, but
Right.
because it didn't mean anything to you,
Right.
you missed it. And a lot of times, we don't say, this is what I want to do. Now, once you begin to do something Chris is talking about, you'll see houses boarded up, grass high, mail all over the place. Now, those houses have always been there, but it wasn't important to you. So the first step is, I got a TV, you got to decide this is what you want to do. And then you begin to decide, what method am I going to use? So for some people, because all this is marketing, y'all. Opening up your mouth, hey, this is what I'm going to do. I'm a big proponent of talking to agents, letting them know, hey, if you got something ratty, dirty, dated, you walk in there and it's hot and you're stepping over animal stuff, call me. And because most inventory still comes through agents and realtors. And so letting the people know that this is what you want to do is important. And then Crystal also said, sounding confident. Now, you can sound confident because you can say you have a business partner. I'll be a business partner who is looking for deals in this area. And so if you don't feel comfortable talking to them, you can send them to us and we'll call them for you and all those type of things. So we'll hold your seat on that, but you will find most, and to your point, so many deals happen because people in the neighborhood know one another.
Yep.
Mary died and the kids don't want to deal with the house and whatever else. And the next thing you know, the house is sold before it even hits the market.
That happened to the house 2 doors down from me. I had a tree fall, part of a tree fall in my backyard. And I got a note on my door that said, hi, my name's Bob. I burn wood. Can I come cut up your tree? And I was like, oh, I just got a quote for $1,500 to cut up the wood. Feel free to come take it. So, we were outside.
You're right.
We were outside chatting. And he said, oh, my brother-in-law lived 2 doors down. He just passed away. I said, oh, I'm really sorry. He said, yeah, they're getting ready to, to do something with the house. It's packed to the gills. He was a bit of a hoarder. He's got, kids in their 30s. They're really unrealistic about the price. I said, listen, I work with investors. I've flipped a house. I'm looking for another project. I'd love to be able to take a look at the house. He said, let me call you and let you know. I reached out to him and he was like, they have an agent and they already have an offer and they didn't even have the sign outside yet. And then literally the second they put the sign outside, it already said under agreement.
Right.
And, it was like that.
Gone.
But that's what happens. You'll notice that stuff. And I always knew this house was a little strange. You could tell by the stuff they had a barn in the back that's tilted like this, and the roof is kind of falling in.
Yeah.
And I knew it was somebody who couldn't keep up with their house.
Right. Exactly.
We have another one down the street that I am going to attack because I'm pretty sure the guy died.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen him. He used to walk his dogs in front of my house, and I haven't seen him in a few months. So we're going to go after that one. But, just paying attention to that stuff. These are all houses in my neighborhood.
Right.
I drove the street behind me and picked out 4 houses on the street right behind me that were vacant. And I said to my friend who lived on the street, I said, Amy, does anyone live in that blue house? She said, oh, no, nobody's lived in that house for years. So what's going on with it? And she said, she's like, I've been here 10 years. Nobody's lived there for 10 years.
Houses sit vacant for years.
Yeah, and people just they either don't know what to do with them or they're not interested in doing it. One of my clients right now is got a vacant property. It's been vacant since 2012. He reached out to the seller who was in Colorado. She said, kind of forgot about that house. But she said, listen, I don't even care. Take it.
Right.
You don't even need to pay for it.
Right.
There's like a $12,000 mortgage from 2003 for a sewer betterment that's supposed to be paid off in May. He's probably going to get this house for about $500. He said it totally needs to be torn down, but
$500.
Right. House has been vacant forever. You can find these things. It's just a matter of looking, keeping your eyes open and asking. Recruit everybody. Like I said, my My son was coming home from school and said, you know, Mom, I walked home from school and I think that this house looks like somebody's probably leaving. And I was like, well, leaving doesn't mean anything, but they would keep their eyes open for everything. And
Look out for dumpsters. When
Yes.
you see dumpsters in your neighborhood, that's like ting-ling-ling-ling-ling-ling-ling-ling-ling. And don't be afraid to you go up to the guys working in it. Hey, you know, you guys rehabbing it, and you just have a basic conversation about what's going on with the house. And you know, I always look for dumpsters, and you know, sometimes I'll go up to, sometimes I don't. But you know, that means that there's something, and you will find that for some reason there's always activity. You know, what if you need it? There's always like streets that go in clusters. There'll be 2 or 3 or 4 houses that'll go like for whatever reason, you know. You know, so once you see one house go up, it go up for sale or whatever, it seems like they go like that.
They
And
do.
So, yep, you want to look out for that.
You just actually brought something to the forefront for me. Another thing to look for when you're looking at houses, if you see anything with a red X or a line, a sign with a red line, go after those houses. That means they're not safe for anybody to enter. Those are great properties to renovate. I actually had a client that I did a retail closing for. He bought his house. I needed to have him sign one other document that the lender didn't put in the package. And I said, listen, he lives in Lowell. I said, listen, I actually have to go visit somebody at the hospital. You live like 4 minutes down the road. I'll swing by, have you sign the document, and then I'm going to go to the hospital. Not a problem. I drive down, I go to turn onto a street, and the first house on his street is red X'd. And I said, well, that's a 3-family. I said, Paul, what's the deal with the house on the corner? He says, I don't know. I have no idea. I said, does anybody go in and out of there? He goes, oh, no. He goes, I don't think you can go in there. It's not safe. I said, well, I saw the red X, but that doesn't always mean that people don't go in. So I tried to track down the owner. It's owned by a trust.
Okay.
I was able to find who I thought was the trustee. He swore up and down he's not the trustee of the house.
Right.
He's the trustee of the house. He just doesn't want to sell it. But it's literally sitting there just decaying.
Right.
And had I not gone to have him sign this document, I never would have
would've seen
found that house and 2 other ones on the way.
Right.
And there was actually like a senior living on the same street that he lived off of that had closed down. And I said to myself, geez, if I had the money to do this right now, I would totally convert this to 1 or 2 bedroom apartments or even some studios. So I said something to one of my friends. I said, what do you think about this place on Varnum? I said, we could totally convert this into apartments. It's a really good idea. Drive by a couple weeks later,
That's what
it's
happened.
sold, and they converted them all into apartments. So you win some, you lose some. But one of the biggest things to remember is you're going to get people who tell you no. Do not let that dissuade you. For every 10 no's you get, you're going to get somebody who's going to want to work with you. You have to get used to hearing no.
Yeah.
Okay? It's like the door-to-door salesman who's like, hi, do you want me to sell you solar panels? No. They still knock on the doors because eventually somebody's going to say, you know what? I'd love to have some solar panels.
Yeah, exactly.
And they make their money's worth. Don't get discouraged
Yeah,
by that.
but I think that goes back to what we talk about all the time here is, why are you doing this?
Right.
And so you have to have a clear why as to why are you getting involved. And it's about legacy. We're doing this not because we want to flip houses, not because we want to wholesale houses, but we want to leave things for our children.
Absolutely.
And we want to create a lifestyle. And so that's what you have to keep in front of you, that as you're making phone calls and as you're coming to meetings like this and as you're dealing with contractors and the headaches that come to this business. And the reason why you make the money that you could potentially make here is because you're willing to run to what other people run from.
Exactly.
Did y'all hear what I just said? Yeah, I saw like y'all sleeping tonight. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. You heard that? You heard that? You make your money running to what other people run from. One more time. What? We make our money running to what other people run from. So you get paid to fix and handle problems. You got it? The smelly, the hot, the nasty, the cat smelling like pee house. That's your house.
I
You
was
know.
told once the house that smells like death and cat pee is the house you
That's
want.
you. Yeah, that's you. I like, oh, yeah. I mean, if some of you someone follow me and see some things I take pictures of and I'm walking through houses and sometimes I'll go IG live or whatever. And I'm like, all right, guys, I'm here in Brockton. And I'm like, all right, I'm taking you through the house. I'm stepping over this and that. I got a mask on and gloves and a flashlight. You know, but that's where your money is because
Those are the best deals.
Yeah, exactly. So we were talking. We were somebody the other day in Randolph, and she walked. She's like, "Oh, this is nasty." I'm like, "Oh, this is good."
Yeah.
You know, because the house it was a bank owned, and the house was on the market for $325,000. I said, this house was fixed up retail. It'd be $250,000 and up easily. You know, and so none of us like to buy retail out there when we do other things. Right? Everybody wants to sell, but then for some reason, when it comes to real estate, people are like, I want the, and it just depends on where you are. But for us, I like to add a little value to my property because that means I can drive the appreciation up and things of that nature. So don't be afraid to run to problems. You know, and I think what this is what you'll find out. And in this group, and in any group that I'm talking about, there's someone who can fix the problem.
Absolutely. Always is.
You know, I did a video a couple months ago, and I said, you need an OG on your team. An OG is someone who's seen that, been there, done that, and so you go in there, and they're like, oh, that's a hole, there ain't no problem. You see the flaw, we can fix that.
Yep.
You know, and I have a couple in my sphere of influence of people who I say, hey, man, can we fix? Oh, yeah, I can fix that. You know, so don't be intimidated by what other people. That's my message, my long-winded man saying that. So.
One thing I think is important to note is when you were talking about having relationships with real estate agents, not every agent is going to want to work with you.
No.
There are a lot who
exactly.
don't understand investing and don't understand maybe some of the strategies that you're using,
Right.
and will refuse to work with you. Don't take that
And that's
personally.
fine, yeah.
But that goes to what you said about we run to the problems, we don't run from them. What happens a lot of the time, and this is not a slam on real estate agents, their job is to get the property in the best condition that it is,
Exactly.
to get the highest price for their seller. But sometimes you have a seller who can't stage their property, clean it out, make repairs, and they need to get out of the property fast. And listing is not an alternative for them.
It's not an option.
You say, hey, I got somebody who can close in 2 weeks. Cash. You're going to take a little bit of a hit for it, but we're closing cash in 2 weeks. Your property's not going to get foreclosed in 3. Done deal. Done deal. But don't get discouraged if you talk to agents and they say,
Exactly.
if you're wholesaling. Wholesaling you're trying to be a realtor.
Okay.
You're not. No.
Explain wholesale.
Yes.
Does everyone know what wholesaling is? Yes, no, sort of.
Okay.
Say yes or no. This means yes. This means no. Okay. Explain
You got it. Nope,
wholesaling.
we're getting there. Sorry.
Explain wholesaling.
So wholesaling means different things to different people.
It does.
There's basically 2 ways to wholesale. One is to put a property under agreement for a really good price and then sell your contract via what we call an assignment contract for a fee to somebody else. So if I put a house under agreement for $200,000 and I call Dexter and I say, hey, I got this property in Bridgewater.
Right.
I'm looking for $250,000 for it. It needs like $200,000 worth of rehab, but it's a $700,000 area. Making those numbers up because I don't know anything about Bridgewater.
650 is more closer. Just 650.
And he says, hey, you know what? That's a great deal. So I put the property under contract for $200,000. I assign my rights in the contract to him for a fee of $50,000. So he pays $250,000. I'm only supposed to be paying the seller $200,000. So when closing comes, he's now the buyer.
Right.
The seller is still the seller, and I get a $50,000 fee just for putting the property under contract and finding my buyer. So that's the first and the most common way that we refer to as wholesaling in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. It means different things to different people because in some other states they'll tell you you're not wholesaling unless you're closing on the property.
Right.
So you close on the property first and then you resell. So you do like a domino closing.
Called a double close?
Yep. That works wonderfully when you have a really big spread or you have a seller who does not want you to assign your rights
Right.
to anybody.
Right.
Sometimes that will be in your purchase and sale agreement that you
Right.
can't assign your rights. The contract's not assignable.
Right.
Then you get a double close.
No, that's a nugget you just said because in Massachusetts or in most real estate contracts, are they assignable or not assignable?
All contracts are assignable unless expressly prohibited. I can't speak today either. So if somebody says to you, hey, you can't do that. I didn't allow you to assign my contract. You didn't have to. Contract law says it's assignable. You didn't prohibit it.
Right.
Sorry. They're out of luck. But yeah, so a lot of people will close on the property and then turn around and resell. It's a little bit riskier that way because if you have a buyer on the end who's, for lack of a better
Flaky.
term, a little flaky,
Yeah,
yep,
flaky.
and they don't close, you're stuck with this
stuck with
property and a transactional funding loan that you have to pay off in 48 hours. You want to make sure that your buyer on the other end is solid if you're going
Right.
to be double closing.
Right.
I actually work with a great company for transactional funding.
Oh, good.
We love them. They're phenomenal to work with, and they
Okay.
don't charge you points. They
They're-
charge you an annual fee.
They're in Mass?
They're actually in New York, but they will work in Mass and
Okay.
New Hampshire. They'll work pretty much anywhere in the country.
Good.
They charge an annual fee
Right.
and bring every penny to closing. They give you every penny at closing, and you just get it paid off in the BC transaction. So
All right.
that's a great resource. I'm not going to give a little PR plug unless you want me to.
PR,
for who they
go
are.
ahead.
All right, it's Finger Lakes Funding. We love working with them. Julia and Bianca over there are phenomenal. If you want their info, I can certainly connect you with them.
Say that slower.
Finger Lakes Funding.
Finger Lakes, F-I-N-G-E-R?
Yep,
Lakes, L-A-K-E-S?
yep.
Funding.
They're in the
Okay.
Finger Lakes region of New York. Yep, yep.
I've never heard of funding.
So you have to have an LLC in order to get funding from them. They don't lend to individuals.
Yeah. Most.
Just some administrative stuff in the background. So you have to have an LLC, has to be in good standing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to obviously have both contracts before they fund.
Okay.
But they're super easy to work with. I would never hold them to this, but they've turned around deals for us in like 3 days. They don't like to do that.
Right.
Try and give it a couple weeks. But they're phenomenal to
Okay.
work with. And if you find yourself in a position where you need to do a double close, you'll also have to do double closes if you have any REOs or
Mm-hmm.
short sales.
Right.
Real estate owned, so bank-owned properties. So any
Bank-owned
foreclosures.
Yeah.
You can't assign those. Usually you have 24 hours to assign them under the agreement. Nobody knows that, and nobody does it because nobody finds a buyer in 24 hours usually.
Okay.
So you would double close that.
Got it.
The downside is, you pay closing costs on
Yeah.
both transactions, so you want to have a healthy spread.
Right.
But it's a way to get it done. I would caution too, while we're talking about short sales, is that make sure that the short sale deed does not have a resale provision in it, a restriction. Some of the short sale deeds, depending on who they're coming from, will tell you that some of the lenders will put a restriction